here on Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. The Department of Health and Human Services is refusing to disclose how many migrant children separated from their parents at the border they're still holding. Last week, the HHS Secretary, Alex Azar, said 2,047 separated minors were still in the care of the Office of Refugee Resettlement. But the department has refused to give updated numbers, even though the Trump administration is facing a July 10th court-imposed deadline, that's next Tuesday, to reunite all separated children under the age of 5 with their parents. 2 weeks later, all children must be reunited. Meanwhile, the separated children continue to be sent around the country from the border. We saw this firsthand at the airport in Brownsville when we were reporting on the U.S.-Mexico border in South Texas. We're just back, and today we take you along that journey that we went on, from meeting with asylum seekers at a legal port of entry to talking with its airport worker who describes children being brought in early in the morning in order to be flown out to other states. I'm here in the studio with Democracy Now! Producers Laura Gottesdiener and Renee Feltz, who I traveled with to the Mexican border. We encountered these children ourselves at the airport. The Trump administration has been saying that people are illegally entering the United States. So we went to the international bridges in Brownsville, the legal port of entry and the legal way to enter, found asylum seekers sitting for days on the bridge in the hot, baking sun, them and their children, after being told the United States, the country, was full. We go on the bridge with Cristina Patino-Rull, who is director of the Rio Grande Valley Equal Voice Network, and Michael Seifert of the ACLU. This is Democracy Now! I'm Amy Goodman with Renee Feltz, and we're walking over what's called the Old Bridge from Brownsville into Matamoros.
We're about to pay $1 in quarters to cross into Mexico, and we hope to meet with people who've been waiting here for days, potentially weeks, seeking asylum in the United States, but have been turned away.
And we'll see what happens. If there are any migrants on the bridge, we'll go over to the Mexico side, and then we'll come back.
My name is Cristina Patino-Rull, and we're at the Old Bridge at the border of Brownsville and Matamoros, and we're about to cross into Matamoros. So this bridge spans the river that is what makes the border here, and the actual border is in a midpoint on the bridge.
So we're crossing over the international border between the United States and Mexico. Below us, the Rio Grande. Cristina, there's a tent, a kind of makeshift tent on the car bridge, which is right next to us. We're on the sort of pedestrian walkway right below it. And they are now stopping migrants coming over from Mexico right there at the line, at the border?
Yes, exactly. So it's new that they have a tent for the agents on the pedestrian side as you cross from Mexico into the United States, and that tent is only for the agents. It's not for the people seeking asylum. So there's a line now of people seeking asylum without shade or shelter. And what's new now that we've seen in the last few weeks is that previously, you could cross the actual boundary, the actual border, into the United States, and you would get off the bridge. And after you've crossed into the United States, you can make a case for your asylum. Legally, the United States government is obligated to see you and to process your case for asylum. But now that they're stopping people at the boundary, you don't have permission to make that request until you step foot into the United States.
So we'll be going through Mexican customs right now.
As you can see, when we crossed into Mexico from the United States, there was no agent asking for our documents on this side. It's all a new development and very makeshift on the part of the United States.
We've just come into Mexico. We crossed over the highway, and we're now going to cross back into the United States. So, Michael, what about all this? So this is the cars coming from Mexico into the United States.
And up here will be a line of people who are going to want to ask for political asylum, but who are being stopped at the top of the bridge in the sun and told they have to wait their turn, that there's no capacity to process them, when in matter of fact, I think I see a baby crib already up there.
¿Se ha intentado cruzar? Sí, pero no yo que esperáramos y por 3 días enseguidas. Y cuando intentó cruzar, ¿qué dijeron? que esperar. Porque había estaban ellos antes y ya pasaron otros 3.
So we're coming away from the migrants who are sitting on the bridge trying to pass into the United States. Democracy Now!'s Laura Gaddisdien are with us. Laura, talk about the woman who was on the bridge.
Sure. So Evelyn explained that she and her 2-year-old daughter, Jennifer, fled Guatemala because of a domestic violence situation, the father of her daughter. And, you know, when I asked, she said, I went multiple times to the police, and every single time they said, I can't help you, I'm not going to help you. So when I finally asked, do you think there's any protection for you as a woman in Guatemala in a domestic violence case, she said, no, my only option is to come to the United States. And she's got family here, and she's hoping that she'll be able to apply for asylum. The problem's that, you know, she's been camped out on the bridges now for 4 days. They haven't even allowed her, in violation of domestic and international law, to apply for asylum. But if she does get in, it will be probably a challenging situation because Attorney General Jeff Sessions did recently announce that domestic violence cases will no longer serve as a basis for political asylum, which is a very big problem for thousands upon thousands of women fleeing Central America and other places.
So that is the old International Bridge in Brownsville, Texas, between Brownsville and Matamoros, Mexico. We also went to the new bridge and found exactly the same thing. Democracy Now!'s Laura Gaddisdien and Renee Feltz are in the studio with us right now. Laura, as you talk to this 21-year-old Guatemalan mother with her 2-year-old child, too afraid to be shown on camera, but desperate. She had been on both bridges.
Yeah, exactly, Amy. So she had waited on one bridge and been told the U.S. is not allowing anybody in. So then she finally, after about a day and a half, went to the next bridge, and they told her, you know, the U.S. is full, you have to wait. She had some hopes because the, Border Patrol was letting in about a family a day. This is one of the major international points of entry and legal ports of entry. And, you know, what was encouraging was we saw a bunch of food, a bunch of clothes, a bunch of Gatorade. The people on the bridge, Evelyn and the other immigrants, were saying that both people from the U.S. and Mexico, just regular civilians, had been coming to the bridges to make sure that they had food, had water. But we have to remember it was over 100 degrees. Evelyn mentioned that her 2-year-old daughter, Jennifer, was, you know, suffering allergies. This Mexican health worker came by, said he probably thought it was heat rash. And when asked, you know, even though the U.S. has said, or Trump administration has said it will no longer separate families, when asked, you know, was she concerned about family separation, she said, yeah, I am concerned about it, but this is my option. I think it's important to remember, you know, there's a long history of the United States denying Guatemalan asylum cases. During the 1980s, at the height of the armed conflict, when the U.S. was training and funding what is now well understood to be a genocide, the United States denied 98% of all Guatemalan asylum cases. So this is not new. This has been happening for decades. It happened, obviously, under the Obama administration as well. But what we have to remember is that domestic and international law came about after World War II. And particularly one of the most famous cases was, you know, the steamship MS St. Louis, which docked right off Miami Beach. It was so close, the 900 Jews aboard who were fleeing Nazi Germany could see the lights of Miami. And the United States was so concerned that not a single one of them reached U.S. shores in order to try to stay and seek safety, that they sent the U.S. Coast Guard to patrol the ship and the waters all around the ship to make sure nobody set foot in the United States.
And that's really important because there is a change, as you heard, on this bridge. The U.S. Border Guard have now moved directly a makeshift setup right on the border rather than on the U.S. side of the bridge so that immigrants, Renee, cannot walk over. Once they do, they have to be taken into custody if they're applying for political asylum.
That's right, and we saw guards posted right there at the halfway point. The guards had a tent shielding them from the sun. The asylum seekers didn't. And they had been there for weeks, they said, just following orders, turning people away, making them wait. It's something that people that live there have never seen before.
I want to go to a conversation that we had in Brownsville. It was on Thursday, right before a massive rally, one of the biggest that Brownsville had seen outside the federal courthouse, where migrants were being brought day after day in groups to face judges. And it's, you know, Brownsville is where so many of the children have been separated. The big rally was the Keep Families Together rally. And we spoke with Juanita Valdez-Cox, longtime farm worker organizer, executive director of LUPE, which stands for La Unión del Pueblo Entero, the community union. She described the separation of children from their parents being deported alone.
This family, the father was traveling with his 8-year-old and his 10-year-old son. And when they crossed the border, they were apprehended by immigration. And so the father is here at a detention center, actually not too far from here, called La Villa Detention Center. And the children were placed separately. So the father calls the family and of course, frantic and worried that the children, that he didn't know where the children went. And so we were trying to get the children together and get, and we didn't want to call the father because we couldn't find them. For 3 days, it took us meeting with the Human Rights Commission from Mexico, a group of 6 people coming to our office, and us telling them the story of the children, and could they go back into Mexico and see if they could find them. It was also the father of one of our staff members that works with us that helped us in Mexico. Trying to find the children. We finally found them. An 8- and 10-year-old were deported on their own, and the mother didn't know where they were, and the father didn't know where they were.
What does it mean they're deported? How are they left? Where do they go?
They leave them at the border. If it's close, they just put them in the paddy wagons for the border patrol, and then they drop them off at the border, and the children cross into Mexico. But
they drop an 8- and 10-year-old child on the border, and they're supposed to go into Reynosa?
They went into Reynosa, and hopefully there's a shelter in Reynosa, but it has been crowded because there's so many that are being dropped off there. Now, if you're from a further country, they can put you in an airplane and then fly you back. But we're so close to the border that they can just drop you off. They don't need to. But the thing is, they're not responsible after they just drop them off there, right? It's just incomprehensible that is what is happening.
First of all, it's known how dangerous Reynosa is even for adults.
Right.
Speaking about child abuse, they dropped an 8- and 10-year-old child on the border and told them to go into Mexico, and to whom?
Well, we hope that the U.S. government is contacting with the Mexican government on the children, so that they have some assistance when they cross the border, so that they're not by themselves, right? But we were not able to find them for 3 days, and so it's so dramatic.
The family was not able to find them for 3 days?
We found them for 3. LUPE, La Unión del Pueblo Entero, working with lawyers, with the Human Rights Commission, with a consulate and of their country, and we still took us 3 days to find them.
And where were they from?
They are from Tabasco, Mexico.
So that's Juanita Valdez-Cox, executive director of LUPE. And then she had this to say. We're talking about a 9-month-old child and a 1-year-old child alone, separated from their parents.
Yes, they are in this detention center, but the parents are not there. And when the congressman went in to see that, when they come back out and talk to the community, we had a meeting with them. They tell us what they see, and this is what they were seeing. Now, we put together what the congressmen see and the phone calls we get of parents that are looking for their children. Many times they can get a hold of a relative, and the relative comes to LUPE or to other nonprofit organizations and say, we need your help in finding our children. And so we know that this is happening. We know that they're being separated. And the other thing that is just heartbreaking is to see that when the children are crying, yes, they can feed them, and yes, they can change their diaper, but they're not allowed to pick them up and to hold them and to
They're not allowed to hug them.
No, not at all, because apparently the government wants to be careful about, I think, child abuse. Isn't that ironic? They are already doing the worst thing that could happen to the children, and so this is the situation that we've been going through maybe for the last 6 or 8 months since this administration started that zero tolerance policy.
Again, that's Juanita Valdez-Cox, head of the group Lupe. We spoke to her just before a massive rally in Brownsville on Thursday. On Friday, we went to find the separated children. They're in a number of detention centers, but we went to the largest. It's become quite well known. It's the old Walmart in Brownsville, called now Casa Padre. I just wanted to know, is this where the 1,500 children are being held?
No problem. Sorry.
Okay. Well, as you can see, the sign says, "Welcome to Southwest Key Programs, Casa Padre." This is an old Walmart in Brownsville, Texas, and it's where it's believed 1,500 children are being held, are being caged. Congressmen have come here, asked to come inside, have not been allowed to. Senator Jeff Merkley came here. Ma'am? Ma'am, we just want a statement from Southwest Key. Sheriff, we want to speak to someone, and we're saying, can we call a supervisor?
I know you want to speak to someone.
Right.
I'm not authorized to answer your questions. I know you want to speak to someone.
Right.
But if they're not answering, they're not answering. I can't help you with that.
But we have a responsibility as the press.
And I have a responsibility for this property.
Yes, but there's 1,500 children jailed inside. The press needs to know what is happening, and we want to speak to someone.
Ma'am, then you have to go to the proper channels and the proper protocol.
We did, but that number, no one answers.
I can't help that. That's the number we're given to give out.
But we have a responsibility here. We have to speak to someone, and there are hundreds of people who work here, and we want to speak to one of them. We want to speak to a person in charge who can just answer our questions. That's all we're asking. You're doing your job, we're doing ours.
Right, and that's fine. But like I said, I can't help you.
But that's why we want someone to be called from inside who can come and who can help us. Like I recognize you're a sheriff who's working on the outside, and we need someone from the inside of Southwest Key who can talk to us about what's happening inside.
Like I said, ma'am, you want to film all you want outside the barricades, you want to interview whoever's out here, that's fine, but you can't just pass the barricades. And I can't answer your questions, and I apologize.
We've come to the Southwest Key Programs facility where up to 1,500 children, migrant children, are being held in cages inside. We want to know what's going on. We asked to speak to a supervisor. The sheriff's deputies, security, all came out in their golf carts wherever we came to this vast facility. Very few windows, and the windows we see are blacked out. There are barricades up that say, "Keep out." We asked to speak to a supervisor. They said they could only give us a phone number. That phone number, no one answered. Then we were able to leave a message. When we left the message, a while later, someone did call back and said we'd have to call the Office of Refugee Resettlement. They said possibly we could get an interview in the next 10 to 14 days. We called the number, they left, and there's no answer. Again, this is where up to 1,500 children are being held. The barricades say, "Keep out," and private property. Private property. The children, private property, detained in cages inside. When we come back from break, we race to the airport. We meet with a child who was just released from Casa Padre. Stay with us.